from the economy, from the politicians, the policymakers.
Budget just 3 days away, a lot has been made about the government's possible focus in its last full budget before the next general elections in 2019. Will the focus be on the agricultural sector, and how? The jobs debate is back, and the common man believes that now after GST there must be some benefit in terms of less taxes or more exemptions. So what can be expected from the Finance Minister come Thursday? To talk about this, I'm joined now by Rajiv Kumar, Vice Chairman of the Niti Aayog. Welcome to Primetime Debate, Mr. Kumar. In your view, what would be the biggest focus area when we talk about this budget coming at a time when the focus needs to be on agriculture? Let's begin there. What does the government need to do, and what can be done in the scope of the budget?
The biggest focus area of the budget is, of course, to revive investment even more strongly than it has already done, and to push up the growth rates in the economy while maintaining macroeconomic stability. Now, within agriculture, however, the budget could be the occasion for the government or the finance minister to lay out a possibly different approach towards agriculture, which doesn't focus as much on simply raising output, agricultural output, but focuses much more sharply on raising farmers' income. And that can be achieved by reducing costs of inputs. It can be achieved by connecting the farmer better to markets, giving him more information about what he could expect in terms of price and output trends, and to convert him from being a commodity producer to that of being an agro-product producer. So essentially to modernize the sector and make it more commercial and make it more science and technology based. So that's what the budget could do for the agriculture. But to repeat and emphasize that the budget would, as in the past, try to push growth further and improve investment sentiments and maintain macroeconomic stability.
Sure. Just one more word on agriculture, because during this week, of course, at Bloomberg Quint, we've been speaking to a number of people and experts on various facets of the budget, and I had the opportunity to speak with MS Swamynathan, whose report had suggested costs plus 50%. That is a demand which has been echoed by a number of farmer groups. We've seen a fair share of farmers protesting during the last year, 2017 as well. Do you think that that is a feasible proposition?
I mean, who am I to contest a venerable person and a great scientist like Mr. MS Swamynathan? But so therefore, I'm sure what he suggested is feasible and and could be done. But just that my own perception is that we need to focus now on farmers' income, and that can be achieved both by raising productivity and lowering costs, rather than only in terms of price support and playing around with prices, which we can't, of course, offer to the entire range of agriculture products. Only 24 of the 100 or odd commodities are covered by the minimum support prices. So I wonder how would those farmers be taken care of under this paradigm who do not grow cereals or crops covered by the minimum support price framework.
Okay. You spoke about boosting investor sentiment as one of the many goals of the budget. And in that context, I want to ask you about long-term capital gains tax. It has been proposed that this be moved to 3 years. You have spoken about it as well in a previous press conference. Do you think the time has come, and do you think it is something which could be tackled in this budget?
It has to be tackled in a manner that it does not impact negatively on investor sentiment. So whatever is done to equalize the returns, as it were, to equalize the returns on different class of assets, must be done in a sensitive manner, and perhaps the budget would handle it, but in a manner that will not dent investor sentiments going forward.
What would that manner be? Because if long-term capital gains tax is moved or tinkered with,
I am not privy to that.
Okay.
And I therefore can't really, I can't speculate on any of that.
Another aspect of what corporate India is citing in its wish list, and it has been for some time now, since the first budget that this government presented, is a reduction of corporate tax rates to 25%, rationalization of MAT,
Yes.
etc. Why do you think that promise has taken so long to be delivered? And is that one clear way of boosting private investment, in a way also helping with the jobs issue?
You know, the last budget announcement by the finance minister, which covered, I forget the turnover limit that was announced, but it did cover, I think, up to 95% of all business and commercial entities in this country. So it is only 5% that have not been, that do not have the benefit of a simple 25% corporate rate of taxation. Perhaps the next step would be to raise that limit further, so that we can get more into the same at the same level, at the same stage, same rate of corporate taxation. That would leave just a bare handful who might have to pay a higher tax rate, and that also would go, as the finance minister has announced, once the direct tax structure is rationalized and we can do away with all the exemptions that are there at this point. You know that a committee has been established to revise the direct tax code, the direct tax law, and I guess it will be the mandate of that committee to suggest a final cleaning up, as it were. So it's not true to say that the finance minister has not abided by his promise. He has done that for a large majority, for a very large majority of business entities in this country. It's only a very small minority of large corporates who are still out of it, and that, as you know, their effective rate of taxation is no more than 23-24%. So I don't know where the grief is.
Okay, that turnover limit was at 50 crores. Of course, big business is asking for this effective tax rate, saying that they would like to push it. You yourself said that the effective tax rate is 22-23%. So then let me come to the next section of society, which is your...
But there you go. I mean...
No, do continue. Do complete your point.
So if you raise that limit,
yeah.
If you raise that limit above 50 crore, it'll bring another huge chunk of businesses at the level of 25% flat, rate of taxation, a clear thing. But my argument was that the bigger corporates, even now do not pay the 25%, despite the fact that there is the 25% plus cess, etc. Because with all the exemptions that they've got, the effective tax rate, as you know very well, is no more than 22-23%.
Which brings me to the next section of Indians, and there's a lot of people have different wishes and different expectations from the budget, and this section is the, I would say, salaried employees or the middle class who are taxed at 30% plus at the highest rate, less than your biggest corporates, as you spoke about. And they are thinking now that GST is here, now that the tax base has increased, is it time now finally to either reduce those rates, increase the slabs, more exemptions? Do you see room for that, Mr. Kumar? We
have to let the indirect tax regime, the newly established GST regime, stabilize. and figure out as to how much buoyancy it brings to the indirect tax collection. It will bring buoyancy. It will bring, in fact, I believe, a lot more buoyancy than what is assumed or expected at this time, because as the economic survey points out, there has been an increase of 50% in those registered for indirect taxation. And I think this number is only likely to go up. Several sectors which have been outside the indirect tax net are being brought into the tax net perhaps for the first time, which will also lead to a greater formalization of the economy. But all of that does not necessarily mean that we are in a situation where we are buoyant enough to start tinkering with personal income tax rates. So I think we might have to wait there for a while before we come to that.
Is that concern on GST collections? They have rebounded in the last month, but some would argue nowhere close to what was expected.
I think the bounce back is indicative of the fact that there is a sort of 90,000 crore figure for monthly collections at the moment. That is kind of a baseline, but henceforth, with the e-way bill coming into force from 1st of February, and also a further rationalization of the taxes, I think this is only bound to go up. We can't predict at this point of time, within 6 months of the taxes introduction, as to what should be what would be the kind of normal, as it were, level of monthly collections of GST. I think we'll have to wait another 4 or 5 months to get to that. And also, I hope that the hardening of oil prices, global oil prices, will induce the GST Council to bring in oil and petroleum products within the ambit of GST. That should further boost it, and I hope that happens sooner rather than later. But bottom line, can't still say at what level the revenues would stabilize. My own guess is that they will go up further and then stabilize at a higher level.
I want to speak to you about jobs, sir, because jobs data is something which is not there in clear terms, formal jobs data. There has been a lot of talk and debate over the last few days about the extent of formal jobs created in the economy. There was, of course, a payroll data report, and we spoke a little while earlier to one of the co-authors, Dr. Ghosh. The economic survey talks about 53% formal jobs in the economy, non-farm payroll jobs, based on GST data. And then there is a set of economists and academicians who question that data, saying that you're not talking about what GST demonetization has done or about the informal economy. Do you think that there is a clear need to come to a consensus on the extent of the problem before solutions are found?
It is impossible to get a consensus with those who are hell-bent on simply criticizing for the sake of criticism. I think the amount of work that Ghosh and Ghosh did in cleaning up and analyzing the EPFO data should have convinced most reasonable people that work is very sound, and that they've actually underestimated the increase in jobs of 55 lakhs in 2016-17. But the people who would who would nitpick will continue to nitpick. So I'm not sure that we want a consensus, because that, as you know, among economists, you put 3 of them in a room and you get 4 opinions. So that's very difficult, if not impossible. But what we need to do, of course, is to continue the good work that Ghosh and Ghosh have done. And Niti Aayog will try and set up a unit which will handle big data, unemployment, and high frequency data, which will then carry forward this payroll data review, data examination on a regular basis. At the same time, as you know, my predecessor had chaired a committee which had recommended a whole new framework for undertaking household employment surveys, and then to be releasing that data on a quarterly basis rather than the existing NSSO's release of data every 5 years. Now, the first survey for this is already in the field, I'm told, by Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, so that you will begin to get the household survey based employment data by, I think, towards the end of this year, I think the last quarter of this year, and then that will be produced quarterly also. So, we are trying now, for the first time, this government is trying after all these years to really get a handle on what the employment data is like, and how much of it is in the formal sector and how much in the informal. So all of that is being addressed, and I think we will soon, as I said, before the end of this year, the quality of data is said to be vastly improved, which will allow much better diagnosis as we go forward.
Absolutely. Data collection and identifying the data perhaps is one part of the equation. The second question is jobs, formal, informal. And before I ask you what you think the budget can do to improve employment creation, I must talk to you about a comment that the Prime Minister made recently in an interview to a news channel where he talked as a way of example of a man selling pakoras, as part of employment. There has been a lot of commentary on this. There has been some politicking on it, but I want your view on whether you would consider that as part of job creation and where it fits into this entire, sort of a communication about the jobs issue.
I think this debate has become too hackneyed and too cliched, because what is employment, what is good employment, what is not employment, etc., etc. I wonder what we are interested in. Are we interested in our young people earning an income to sustain themselves and to get on with their life and to improve their life, their life, their living standard? Or are we interested only in them getting either white or blue collar jobs, which we define as jobs and nothing else? When the Prime Minister referred to the person opening a small stall and selling pakoras or cheese or whatever else you might say, and earning an income when he had nothing else, he wasn't doing anything else before, he surely meant it as an example of people who are self-employed. And you and I know that in this country, self-employment is a huge category of people, and there are people who would rather be self-employed than to be in sort of full-time employment. Now, if that is possible, if it is possible for us to have at this point of time small entrepreneurial startups which will earn an income for anybody, I don't see why we should resent or refute that. So I don't know where the debate is. Yes, it is a fact that our young people, their aspirations are running sky high, and they want to improve their living standards as rapidly as possible, and that is what we should be prepared for. But no doubt that this can be a first step in a young person's journey to become self-sustaining in a situation where he or she is not being able to afford higher education or vocational education as yet. And that's the other part of it, which is that we must now have a very good look as to how we open up our vocational and other technical educations, so that they can become, they can adopt a flexible approach towards giving these skills to people who might be earning some things on a part-time basis, but yet also want to continue to improve their skills for a better prospect in future.
So which brings me to the question of what can be done in the scope and within the scope of the budget, because this government has launched the Mudra scheme, the Startup India scheme, the Stand Up India scheme, and perhaps these things have longer gestation periods. But what can be done at this point?
Couple of things in my view. One, I think the budget could replicate and extend what has been done in the textile sector, which is or the ready-made garment sector, which was announced a package of 6,000 crore, I think, about a year and a half ago, essentially in the form of, if you like, wage subsidy for the employers of those who are exporting garments and who are putting up units, units. So if this could be extended to other labor-intensive sectors, that would be a great relief. Because in our country we have converted, because of our own specific situations of human rights and democracy, etc., and trade unionism, our surplus labor into a costly labor. So therefore, for our exporters and to remain globally competitive, and also for other industries, we need to bring down the cost of labor, which in other countries like, for example, Germany or China or even Japan, is subsidized indirectly by the government providing cheap housing and health and education, which is all a part of the worker's consumption basket, but for which she doesn't have to pay from his own pocket. Now, to be able to remain competitive, our industries should also have access to similarly cost wage labor. So this is what the budget could do, to extend the textile package to leather and handicrafts and carpets and maybe even light engineering, wherever the finance minister thinks he could generate jobs more cheaply. And the second thing that the budget could do is to promote and incentivize apprenticeships in our industry, which is really which has really been missing in our country. And many countries have actually taken recourse to providing, to promoting apprenticeships in industries for generating tomorrow's jobs, on a less costly basis. Because if the government was to enforce the provisions of the 1961 Apprenticeship Act, which calls for 2.5% to 10% of workforce being apprentices, then I think they could solve a huge problem of a mismatch between skilling and industry demand, because companies which give apprentices would obviously give them in areas where they see future opportunities. So that's something that the government could promote by offering a greater government support to industries, offering apprenticeships, and to also take away any compliance burden, as it were. Not compliance burden, but to take away any sort of inspector Raj sort of attributes of implementing the scheme.
Last point, Mr. Rajiv Kumar. This is the last full budget of this government before general elections in 2019. It is widely expected that that may be a factor in putting together this budget. I would not go as far as to call it a populist or a pre-election budget, but will that be, sort of a consideration?
You are right in being reticent about calling it populist, because the past trend of this government has shown that it has never really bothered about elections while formulating its budget or other policies, and most of these actions have been policy actions have been taken with reference to certain commitments that the government has to reform and the government has to inclusion. And the second one, the inclusion commitment, which is either in opening 300 million Jan Dhan accounts or launching several other schemes for gas stoves and for connecting households, etc., should not be called populist, because that is what the people of this country are firmly entitled to, and that's what they should get. Similarly, now if the budget lays emphasis on improving access to better quality health and better quality education, for the people, for the common people of this country, I'm sure nobody should call it populist and so on, because that's exactly what you need to run a sound capitalist economy. You have to provide to the people who don't have the same initial conditions or initial endowments as you and I have, means to get an equality of opportunity, and for that the government has to deliver. And what you have to have in India is a development state, which fulfills its mandate of providing some basic preconditions for a market-based economy, and these preconditions are provision of infrastructure, law and order, primary education, and basic health. And I think the budget you would see, I hope you would see some emphasis on these aspects in the forthcoming budget as well, which will certainly not make it a populist budget.
Okay, it is a pre-election budget one way or the other, because factually it's taking place in that year. So of course we'll be keeping an eye on that and all the other factors which we'll see on the 1st of Feb. Thank you so much, Mr. Rajiv Kumar, for your time and for speaking with us this evening on Bloomberg Point.
बढ़ते समय के साथ बढ़ती सुरक्षा का वादा। LIC की जीवन प्रगति पॉलिसी, जिसमें बीमा की अवधि में हर 5 वर्ष बाद अपने आप जोखिम सुरक्षा की